Well, a very good afternoon to everybody. John Hendricks here. Ross Jackson will be joining me shortly. Let's get some vocabulary right. And so, happy draft day. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. We're just going to do a pre-draft show. Just kind of talk a little bit. And especially if you guys got questions, we're going to have some answers hopefully for you. And yes, I am freshly faded. Thanks to Mason and Bender out in Mandeville for the hookup. They took care of me. So I advise you guys to go take a look at them as well. So, what we're going to get into, obviously, the Saints, they pick at 14th. We've heard a lot of the rumors that have circulated today, but if you haven't heard, the Broncos are trying to move up from 12. The Eagles are trying to come up from 22. When Ross and I did our mock simulation the other day, we traded down with the Eagles, right? And I know people are like, oh gosh, let's get a little bit concerned and scared a little bit because of that, because it's the Eagles, but I don't know. This is the time where everything comes out in the sun. And I think pretty much anything you put out there is going to stick. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can say the Saints are working the phones. Yeah, they've been working the phones for, about a day and a half ever since Mickey got off his press conference. They work at that in the afternoon. And so they're going to be talking to teams. And just so you know, the way Mickey kind of talked about it, and this is how it goes, is they're going to look at 10 teams up and 10 teams back and 10 positions, and you just kind of see what it's going to take. Talk to GMs, and then the more familiar the GM is with the other GM, that's really going to really dictate some of the action. And so that's why, you look at Jacksonville, the Saints are a familiar partner with the Jaguars. That's why we like trading into the fourth round at 116, is because of that familiarity, and it makes a lot of sense. Good afternoon, Jerry. Appreciate you joining us and such, and appreciate everybody else. Again, Ross will be here momentarily. And again, if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the comments. We will get to them as much as possible. I'm going to get into my mock here shortly, but don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got all the funness coming. We're going to be at the draft facility here in a little bit. I'll be heading out that way. So a lot of good stuff, but we'll talk about my mock draft, right? So I put out, so we've done some on the video side. I put out mine only one, if you will, because I usually only just do one, guys. I think, and it's not that I diminish the process, but it's at this point, it's like if you throw it so many times at the wall and hoping something sticks, I don't think that's the purpose. The purpose of a mock draft, in my opinion, is A, it gives you some insight into the prospect. I think that's the top priority. And then B, it just gives you an insight of what the Saints could be thinking. I think when you get into the later rounds, it is kind of a crapshoot. But I mean, I've had some people that I've mocked in the past that have actually hit in the afternoon or the day 3 picks and stuff, and day 2s and stuff. I mean, it's just one of those that you just hone in. And I think when you look at the track record for the Saints, if they have a good RAS score, that's a positive. If they were at the Senior Bowl, that's another positive. And so that's kind of where it goes. But looking at what happened in my mock draft, so we'll start there. Again, Ross will be here soon enough. But I took Talise Fuaga. That's pretty much, it's Talicia Fuaga. But I took him, and I think that right tackle is the way to go, right? I think you don't overthink this, right? I don't think that there's something else that comes up magically. And Courtney's right there. I understand Brock Bowers. That's very interesting. And we've talked about it much. So be sure to check on those past episodes where we talked about the Brock Bowers and the reason maybe we don't. And that's why I say guys like a Jatavian Sanders, maybe on day 2 or, day 3, you can look at Theo Johnson. There's Eric All from Iowa. There are some options that are very exciting at the tight end position. But I mean, Brock Bowers is kind of in a league of his own. So it'll be interesting. But I think at 14, the safe bet is got to be right tackle. And that's why I took Fuaga. And so I really love JC Latham. And I know there have been some criticisms. We talked about the penalties on here. I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's more of the effort is the question there, I think, from Latham. And look, I think, somebody was talking about it. If Nick Saban couldn't get the motivation out of him, I don't know if it's going to be any different in the NFL. I don't know. I mean, that's a question. And I think that's where you look at the scouting process and the vetting process. And those are answers that, the scouts are going to ask, or the teams are going to ask, coaches are going to ask. Is like, hey, we saw you gave up on a few plays. What's up with that? And those answers may affect your draft stock, and it, may tank you a little bit and hurt you a little bit. But I think Latham is a guy that I really like. I know that's kind of been my guy, but like I told Ross here in the last show, that the logical pick the one that I think is actually going to happen is Fuaga. And so I don't think anybody should be wrong or upset about that. True right tackle, I think that's where the need is. Again, if you didn't catch Mickey Loomis's, presser, and we've been talking about this for months, the team has not given up on Trevor Penning, right? The new offensive line coaching staff is very eager to work with Trevor Penning. And so that's the thing, is they're giving him the benefit of the doubt. And again, he's going to be their left tackle. So if you get a guy like Olu Fashanu, do you move him over to the right side? What is the plan there? They're not moving Trevor inside. They're going to be putting him at left tackle. And so they think that he can adapt, that he can still be the player that they're hoping him to be. And so, again, I think that it remains to be seen, but that's what I liked about the true right tackle of Latham or Fuaga, and that's who it goes. And again, there's Fotano out there. That's another one that's very interesting. That's I've seen mocked, and Fashion is the popular pick, but Fuaga is my guy tonight, and that's who I'm going to stick with on 14. Now, I told you guys to get your questions in. We're going to answer them. And so I'll take this one. Thank you, Cordell. It says, chances that the Saints shock us and trade down or draft a position other than offensive tackle. Look, here's what I'd say. First of all, the Saints are a team that never rule anything out. They always can do the impossible. What I'm saying is they're shock and awe, if you will. And so I think when you look at it, there's no telling. But Mickey Loomis said that this team is 15-0 when it comes to trading up in the draft. And so that's something that should happen, right, at some point. And my thing is, I hope that they're not in a situation where they say, the worst case I feel like is that there's a run on offensive tackles here, and then the Saints get in a panic, and then they start trading away all these assets to get an offensive tackle, because I think that's the hard part, is that if you can wait. They said they feel good about their cloud of players that come in 14 they do all these mock simulations, all these different things. But the problem, if more offensive tackles go, and again, I saw Daniel Jeremiah's report that's saying that offensive tackle teams are looking. And I think the Saints obviously are going to be making calls because they're going to find out what's there. But I'd hate for them to only move up a few spots. And I wrote about this on Saints News, that I referenced a lot of the trades that have happened already from last year. And so I think the cost of them not having a third or fourth round really hurts them. And so you're going to have to dip into next year if you really want to move up, unless you're okay with parting with that second rounder. I just don't see it. I think 2 in the top 50, that's 2 players, presumably, that could one start for you, and then B, the second player could play a huge role for you. I think those are guys that you really need on this team. And, wide receiver is obviously a huge need, and defensive tackle is a huge need in my opinion. And I think it's offensive line. I think it's wide receiver, and I think it's defensive tackle. But trading down, it's not happened, but it's not impossible. Again, when we ran through our mock simulation, what we did is we traded with the Eagles, and the Eagles are a team right now that's looking to move up. I don't know what exactly they're looking for. They could be looking for an offensive lineman as well. And so what we ended up proposing, or what we did, is we traded back to 22nd, and we picked up pick number 50. And so that's the original Saints pick there. And so they also have 53. And so I think that's a possibility. Now, they've dealt with the Eagles in the past. The only problem, in realistically speaking, is the Saints probably are going to have to send something back, or they will send something back. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be as clear cut as, Philly moves up 8 spots and they just give us 22 and then a 50th, or a 53rd pick. I think the Saints probably send back a 5th or even something higher, but you got to look at those trade charts and all that fun stuff. And look, I wouldn't be surprised, but it's just not the MO, right? It doesn't happen. It's not a common thing, but never rule it out. But I think the Eagles are a team to watch. You just got to look, because these teams are going to heat up the phone. It's going to go until the person or the Bears are on the clock, right? The GMs are going to talk to each other. They're going to try to figure out this draft board situation. The Saints are going to make calls. You're going to hear all of that today. It is crazy, because this is the week where you hear more and more about prospects and this and that and all that. And I mean, we talked about it here. It's just people leaking information to help their clients or their prospects, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever the case may be. I mean, that's just how it goes. So hopefully that answers your question. I doubt it, in all fairness, And then as far as drafting another position other than offensive tackle, look, it depends on what happens on the board too. I think that's obviously another thing is that in our simulation that Johnny Newton is who we took at 22, and I feel good about that. And Ross Jackson is joining me, and we can kick. What is happening, Ross?
I'm here.
You are here, and it's okay. I was sweating bullets. I was like, oh no, I'm just kidding. Everything's good. I was answering a question. We're in the middle of talking about this possibility about the Saints shocking us trading down and drafting a position other than offensive tackle. So happy draft day, first of all, foremost to Ross Jackson. But what are your thoughts about trading down? I was talking about Philly wanting to move up. Denver is at 12. They're trying to move up. There's all these teams that want to move up. I mean, shoot, the Saints would like to move up, but and I want to. I want $1 million, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get it.
Yeah, I think that the idea of like moving up could be something that they look at. I think the idea of trading down, I really like trading down in the second round. I'm actually working on getting my mock draft out, my final mock draft out for today. And that's one that I don't think is too far away from possibility at all for this team, is the opportunity to be able to move back there. I don't know if you're going to be able to move back at 14, though, if you really want to get one of those offensive tackles. We got lucky, when we did ours. I mean, we didn't go offensive tackle. We went to tackle, and then we wrapped ourselves back around. But it does sound like it's going to be really active, like post pick 8 or so in this draft. It's something to get really active in terms of trades. So I don't know that it would be super surprising to see the Saints end up trading up to make sure that they go and get their guy.
Yeah, look, we're not as crazy as we think. You know what I'm saying? We literally played out the scenario of trading with Philly, and we're like, this probably isn't going to happen. But now it's like, I think it could be a distinct possibility. And, we're talking about Austin Powers, Jackson Powers Johnson. Golly, that's where my head's at today. Jackson Powers Johnson on the interior, because James Hurst retired. Obviously, this is something that he thought about last offseason. And then, shout out to James, because he's an amazing guy in the locker room.
Man.
First of all. So wish him well.
He's going to have such a good media career.
Yeah, I think so. He could do whatever he wanted. He did say, he was telling Football, those guys over there, he was telling them that, he's pursuing his MBA and all those other things. And, he just wants to see what he is. They joked about opening a PJ's coffee shop in where he's at. And he's like, it could be a possibility. You never know. James Hurst, the barista, that would be pretty funny. But, he's definitely a guy that it's unfortunate because he's a plug and play player. You could put him at left tackle. You could put him at left guard. But now you're kind of one of those things where this might move up a need to get an interior offensive lineman. Here's what I would ask you. Is 14 and 45 both on offensive linemen stupid? Could you see that instead of going for a wide receiver at 45?
Yeah, definitely. No, I definitely think that it could be. I mean, you could go, let's say, like if you're fortunate enough and you get there at 14 and Talisa Fuaga's on the board and you take him and then you wrap around to 45, and then we could say that maybe like if you have a falling Jackson Powers Johnson like we had in our mock, or you have a Frazier out of West Virginia, he's another guy that can move around on the interior and all that could end up adding some really good production for you. A Cooper Beebe could end up being a guy that's into that spot too at 45. Like any of those guys could make a ton of sense for New Orleans to potentially go out and grab. To make sure that they shore up their offensive line. You can grab, a guy like Kieran Amagaji as well out of Yale, who could, 6'5", can play outside at the tackle spot, but can also move inside to guard, and probably will move inside to guard at the next level. So they're absolutely there at both 14 and 45 to potentially get that done if they wanted to.
Here's a question I have for you, and there's some other questions I want to get to, but here's the thing. This is a very rich class in offensive linemen. What is the drop off between somebody like a Fashanu, Fortano, and Fuaga to maybe a guy you get in the second or third round? Like, what do you see as a major drop off? And because we've even gone into the fifth round and gotten guys like Javon Foster, and I'd feel good about Javon Foster playing on this offensive line personally. And that is one of my mock picks. But what is the big drop off between a guy in the first round, like those three Fs, and then maybe second round where you're looking at the other ones?
Yeah. I think it's about development, right? It's about the guys that are
Mm.
ready to step out on the field right now. And then the guys that are in the second round might need training camp to figure it out. The guys that are in that fifth, sixth round might be guys that, can need to develop over time a little bit longer and things like that. And so that to me is kind of the biggest thing. You've got a lot of really, really good offensive tackle talent in this class, whether you're drafting at 14, 45, 150, like we've done, like all that, you're going to be able to find all those guys. But the biggest thing is who's ready to go week one. And the guys that are ready to go week one are the guys you can get at 14. Even a guy like Georgia's Amarius Mims, who like has all the length in the world, has, all the athleticism in the world, like just has all the tools and traits, still needs development because he's only got 6 starts in his career. Right. He's played a lot of games, but he's only got 6 starts in his career. So I think that's the big thing that is kind of the drop off between your, Fautanu and, Latham and your guys like Tyler Guyton and Graham Barton and Amarius Mims. Is just who's going to be ready to step on the field week one versus who's going to be ready to step on the field day one versus who's going to be ready to step on the field week one. Those are 2 different conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it remains to be seen because the way they look at, I mean, you got guys like Landon Young who've been on the roster, and I know I've been talking about him, but he's been in this offense, he's been on this team, and it's for a reason. He's started at some point. So I'm not saying that's the plan, but I'm just saying that if they could afford to go with a different position and or address it later, if they can't get the guys that they want at 14, I don't think all is lost. That's the main thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you're sitting there at 150 and you still haven't been able to address offensive tackle, are you going to get an offensive tackle that's new to your system and new to the NFL that's better than Landon Young that's been in your system for years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those are the types of things. You then go from comparing draft prospects to comparing draft prospects and the players that are already on your roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Justin, he asked, happy draft day, main thing. And thanks for the question. Thoughts on Penix, and do you think he's in their cloud at 14? No. This one keeps coming up. This one is a big one. And we passed on him at 45. Look, here's the thing. What is the knock on Michael Penix, I guess, is the main thing. And just the short answer is, the Saints aren't going to have 6 quarterbacks. I just don't. This isn't the year you take on a quarterback. I understand the question, but it's not the year they take the quarterback. But do you think is the big disparity against Michael Penix right now?
I think the biggest thing is 2 different things. It's throwing motion, which is just an uncharacteristic or uncanny throwing motion for the NFL. It's probably something that they'll look to adjust. If you've got a good quarterback coach, though, you don't care about that, right? Like that's not that big of a deal. The bigger question is health. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? I think a lot of people would talk about the fact that he's 24 years old. Like Zach Wilson just got traded to the Denver Broncos. He's been in the league for a few years now. He is only 24 years old. But yet when you're drafting the prospect that's coming into the NFL, all of a sudden, oh no, he's 24 years old. He's the oldest thing in the world, which is kind of dumb in my opinion. So I like the idea of an older quarterback coming into the NFL. I want maturity. I want leadership. I want experience. I want all those things. So I don't really think that age is as much of a factor as the public makes age out to be a factor or as media makes age out to be a factor. I think when it comes to Penix, the biggest things are throwing motion and can it translate to the league, and then health are the 2 big things.
Yeah, I mean, you got quarterbacks playing till 38 and 40. I mean,
right? Yeah, who cares?
I'm not saying he would, but nobody cares. That's like still 14 years. Courtney likes Jordan Travis later in the rounds.
Me too.
Yeah, we can talk about him in a second. James says he likes, speaking of throw motion, Phillip Rivers. I do not disagree whatsoever. Let me get to this quick. And if you guys have questions, we're going to try to get to as many as we can before we get out. The Saints trade to a 5 to get a 3 and then trade to get a 4. Trade a 5. Well, I would just say, first of all, you can't trade 5th to get a 3rd. I just don't think that's possible. That would be my take, is you can't package a whole bunch of 5ths and get into 3rd. You'd have to give up something for next year too. I just don't see that as a possibility. Now, in our simulation, when we got into 4th, which again, I really like the concept of trading with Jacksonville and getting 116 or 114 from them on it as in the 4th round. It didn't take as much. We put out 150 and then we gave a 4th next year, and that was enough to get that. But your thoughts on those day 2 picks, that late day 2 pick and early day 3 pick. I know the Saints aren't just going to sit on their hands. They're going to try to get into those rounds.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's going to come down to who's on the board, right? Because like that selection of players in the 4th round is really weak for most years. That there's kind of a drop off post 100, and then the value kind of creeps back up around where the Saints would be getting back on the clock at 150 or so. And so there's sort of this 50 pick disparity getting out of the top 100 with a couple of exceptions. And so I think it would depend upon who's going to be on the board there. Two of my favorite trade targets in that area are Brendan Rice, the wide receiver out of USC, and Cole Bishop, the safety. And Cole Bishop, the safety out of Utah. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and spoil it now. In the mock that I'm about to drop is my final mock. I have him trading up for Cole Bishop at 121. I think I had him call. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but there's an old friend at 121, the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton. He's there. Yeah. Remember him? He's.
Did you trade Taysom for him? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no. Did I get him in there? Might have dangled him in the negotiations, but pulled it out. Pulled it at the last second. But that would be the second year in a row that we see the Saints in Denver have a draft day trade. They traded last year to be able to get up to A.T. Perry by moving Adam Troutman to Denver. Yep. So those are the things that do make sense. So I think you got to go there for specific players. And that's typically why you trade anyway, but you got to go there for specific players. Remember last year, Saints traded at the end of day 2 to get the very first pick of the 4th round. So they were on the clock right away. Yeah, away at Chicago round 4, so that they could grab them and stuff. So that was targeting specifically Nick Saldiveri. So who, by the way, Nick Saldiveri could be one of those guys that's also in the running to start at left guard, or at least compete at left guard. So a couple of ways for them to go there.
And Jeff Ireland told us at the Senior Bowl that they envisioned him at least starting or compete to start. That was his what exactly he said. So, I mean, it's possible. And again, I know this doesn't excite people, but Saints have a method to their madness. And I'm just going to throw this out there and answer this real quick. Max Garcia is not under contract. He's an unrestricted free agent. He still wants to play football. He's a great guy. Mm-hmm. I think he's one of those that'll find a team before training camp. So that would be a thing. Dalton Reisner, the Saints. Yeah. I mean, now I would say he wants to have starting guard money, but what is starting guard money? But now in a situation where Mickey Loomis said on Tuesday that this team is going to be active in free agency, and we've thrown out guys like Justin Simmons, Hunter Renfrow still out there. Dalton Reisner, we've been talking about forever because of the connections to Janoko and Kubiak and all these other things. If you're the Saints, are you making that call as fast as possible to make sure you secure somebody like him, a guy that started, or you're going to just see how this draft plays out and then we'll see what happens?
If I'm the Saints, I've already made a phone call. You know what I mean? I've already been like, hey, look, we're interested. Is this place you should be in? Gauging, figuring out through the agent, all these other things, how would he feel? What is he looking for? All these other things. I would have started those. And I imagine that that's not far from reality. But being able to get to a situation to where you're building out, at least the groundwork for interest makes a ton of sense. So I think those conversations would already happen. And I'll tell you what, I would have done the same thing with Andrews Pete too. Gauge his interest in coming back and all those other things, and then potentially making that phone call again after the draft. Reminds me of the pursuit of Tyrann Mathieu, check in and then check in again. Hey, how's it going, homie? You know what I mean? We didn't draft a safety. You want to come through? We didn't draft an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman. Want to come through or whatever? I think if you're bringing an Andrews Pete back, or you're bringing a Dalton Reisner in, you're bringing him in to be a starter more than likely. Yeah. And so if you're not able to find a starter in the draft, which you don't know, even if you do draft an offensive lineman, you don't know if you have a starter until they either are or aren't. I think I would be making those phone calls, but boy, I would have already started that conversation for sure.
Yeah. And Pete, to my knowledge, he's only had one visit, and that was with the Titans. So, again, I think that's it. And so, I mean, just because that's the one that's reported doesn't mean he hasn't talked to other teams. But, when Mickey was asked about him, he didn't want to get into specific players, but his response, he's a free agent. And so maybe he wanted to test the market and see what happens, and then maybe he comes back. But, I don't know if that's the plan that you rely on, because the best laid plans always go to the crapper at one point or another. And so, you just have to deal with it at some point. If that's your plan, again, you want some athleticism on this offensive line. You want some people that can get out in space. You want to do all those things. But, last year, they just can't give up on Trevor Penning as early as they did, right? 6 games in, he couldn't even get in jumbo sets. That was a real problem. And so they're either going to stick it out with him or put a Pete at left guard, potentially, if that's the way they want to go, or, the Penning experiment would just be over altogether, and they put Pete back at left tackle and then figure out what their left guard situation is. So I mean, it remains to be seen. I don't know what they'll do, but there's a possible. We'll ask that Fotano might have some knee issues. Have you heard anything on him regarding his knees? I don't know too much on his potential, and I mean he's a first round projected pick, so I would think that they've done their medical research, and so I think some of the injuries it depends because with college players saying they're injury prone, I don't know if that's necessarily again fair because like Eric
Mhm.
All, for instance, he had a back injury, then he had an ACL injury, and so
Right.
is there a chance that the ACL could get hurt again and torn? It's not as much as you think, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially with today's technology and all the advances in medicine and stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
Were
don't know.
you thinking anything different?
That would be new information to me about him dealing with a knee issue because like he
Yeah.
did all of his off-season stuff. He did all of the athletic testing and everything like that. I'm seeing reports that he has a medical flag, which typically, this came from Albert Breer. Washington offensive tackle Troy Fautano's knee was flagged. That one was described to me as a sort of issue that shouldn't be a problem in the short term, but could wind up impacting his longevity in the pros. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like Ryan Ramchick.
That's scary. So what we're probably looking at is the reason why he's done all of his athletics testing over the course of the offseason, the reason why he played all of his games last year and all these other things came down to the fact that like whatever it is could be something that ends up impacting over the course of time, but is fine right now. So that could cause him to fall. Maybe he becomes an option at 45 all of a
I
sudden.
mean, you just never know because here's the thing. Every single mock draft, every single draft that happens, there are always at least 2 or 3 prospects that everybody thought for sure was going to be in the first round that do not get drafted. It
Remember when DK
always
Metcalf
happens.
was supposed to be like
Take it
top
to
5?
the bank. Yes. Take it to the bank. Go
Yeah,
put a prop bet
100%.
on it. Something. Oh man, let's get a couple more of these questions. Man. Brian asked if the Saints were to pass on Bowers if he's there. Do you think the kid from Iowa is the next great tight end or the kid from Florida State?
So that'd be Eric
I like
All,
Eric
and
All.
that'd be and I like Jaheim Bell, the tight end out of Florida State. I don't think that either are the next great tight end though. Although I will say this, and Mike Triplett and I were joking about this in the media room after Mickey's press conference, that like Iowa always puts out really, really good tight ends, but they like those tight ends at Iowa, like while they're at Iowa, don't have like a massive amount of production or anything like that. So who knows? Like Eric All could surprise. But I like, I think there's other guys out there. Like, I mean, Jatavian Sanders is obviously one of our favorites here on the show. Theo Johnson out of Penn State, like one of our favorites here on the show. And so I think that there's other good tight ends that can translate to the game. I think they'll take a little bit longer to translate to the game. Because the thing that's fun about Brock Bowers is that like I don't think you're going to draft Brock Bowers and say, hey, come here and learn how to block. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you're drafting Brock Bowers and you're saying basically go and be Kyle Pitts, go and play wide receiver. Now it's not going to impact your win-loss margin at all. But I do think that there's a way for them to figure all that out.
That's why we weren't too high on like a Tip Reman. I mean, we had seen that a lot, and it's like he's more of a blocker. And the Saints have the blocking ability. They have Foster. That's who they got, and so I don't foresee that at all. But
you can grab one of those guys that's like a solid blocker, but has untapped pass catching potential. But do that in the 6th round.
Yeah, and look, case in point, one of the guys I really love pre-draft process was Isaiah Likely. I mean, he was somebody that really flourished. And so Mark Andrews was the guy in Baltimore, but once he went down, Likely is a guy, and I even stashed him up on my dynasty roster. That's how much I loved Isaiah Likely. But, it's not always a thing that a first round guy is your best when you're ready for Theo Johnson. Hey, I mean, you never know. Paula asks, not draft related, but the Saints have already let Michael Thomas go. Does it mean no other team wants him since he hasn't been signed yet? So no, that doesn't necessarily mean that, but thank you also for the question. But with Mike, I think he's still got to be healthy, right now. And I think there are teams, I've seen various things out there about other teams pursuing him or interested in him. But I think he's just one of those guys, again, that he's going to have to wait in the process, and he's going to have to make sure he's 100%, right? I mean, he can't go into it, but I've seen the Chargers, but I don't see anything that has been substantial that he's going to. Jeez,
Yeah. That's yeah. And I think the Chargers might even, they've been dealing with they dealt with so many issues with Mike Williams and all that, injury wise and stuff like that, like, they're going to go and grab another guy that hasn't been able to be able to finish a season and all those other things. Like, it's tough. Like, I think if you get the best out of what Michael Thomas has to offer, you're still getting an absolute baller. Like, you're still getting a number one wide receiver. The question is, when is he going to be ready to be that guy again? And is he going to be able to are you going to be able to maintain him? Right. And keep it there. Because that's not just the responsibility of the player, it's the responsibility of the organization too.
Yeah. And I hope Mike does do something, but that would be a shame if he goes somewhere and it's the same thing. That would be tough. Calvin asked about Brevin Ford, 6'7" out of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on him? I mean, I like the height, that's for sure. It's like, Jimmy Graham vibes, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how what a role. Like, okay, think about this. You've got Juwan Johnson, you've got Foster Moreau, and then you've got Taysom Hill, who can contribute as a tight end. And I'm super excited to see what Clint Kubiak and this offensive staff are going to do with Taysom Hill, by the way. But you get a Brevin Ford, who is this big body dude, box out and everything. We just talked about, you can get a guy that has untapped pass catching potential late in the draft. Here's one. And then roll him out there and whenever you're in the red zone or within the 10-yard line. And that's his role for his entire rookie season, is to go out there and catch, 8 passes and 4 touchdowns.
Red zones? Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. Will ask, do they double up with tackles this weekend? We kind of talked about that. I don't know if it's double up on tackles. I think doubling up on offensive linemen wouldn't be a bad idea. But I do think that there is a legitimate need for a possession receiver. I think there's a legitimate need for somebody in the interior. But, when I did my mock, I got somebody late, but it's somebody that could potentially Levi Drake Rodriguez out of Texas A&M Commerce.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that I think could be there. He could be undrafted, but in the 6th round, I mean, he's a guy that I really, really kind of like. And now I don't know if he's going to be a stout run defender like a Roach, but he's somebody that could get after the quarterback for sure. But there are some options there, I think, day 3. I don't think it's one of those that as you get deeper that, there is going to be a drop off because you got your Johnny Newtons, your Byron Murphys, all these guys that are at the top. So there is going to be some drop off for sure. But again, given what the Saints need at that position for like a defensive interior, they don't need a 50, 60 snap guys. They play by a rotation and the guys only get 20, 25 snaps. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah. I think drafting 3 offensive linemen in this class wouldn't be too many.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I mean offensive line as a whole, right? You're looking for a guy that can help you out at tackle, a guy that might be able to help you out on the interior, and then like a project to development guy later. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and my mock. So I went with Fuaga, and then I took Bo Limmer. That was another one for the interior.
Yeah.
I think he's a little bit underrated from Arkansas. Yep, from Arkansas. Yeah. And then I got Javon Foster late. And so Limmer is a guy, I think it gives you a couple things just because he has the center experience. But I think an interior, stout as run blocker, I think he's got to work on his pass protection a little bit. But then again, that's what I'm saying is you can take a guy like that and develop it. And I think the difference between a Doug Marrone and John Benton is going to be leaps and bounds different, especially from everybody we've talked to and everything we've heard. So it's not a knock on Doug Marrone. It's just he comes in with a very authoritative style of coaching, and some people just don't respond well to that. And I think that kind of might have hurt Trevor Penning a little bit, but it obviously will depend. Is Devondre Sweat on the radar at all? I took him.
He's on
our mock. I mean, I think he's 32 teams. He's on 32 teams' radar. They should.
Not always for good reasons, though.
Yeah, well, I know, but I think Devondre's an excellent choice at some point. He's going to go. I think probably – I've seen him in the 4th, but I think probably can go maybe late day 2 at worst case. I took him at 45 just because I'm not going to wait. I think his RAS score sucked. I mean, he's not like going to test off the charts, but, with the off-the-field thing – I don't think that's as bad as maybe some people make it out to be, but it is a thing. That's for sure.
Yeah. I was surprised that Dane Brugler had him as his 10th defensive tackle with a 4th round grade. But I think control, like body weight control and all those other things are a big question mark for him for a lot of NFL teams is what I've heard.
Yep. If you got any more questions, be sure to drop them. We're going to hang out here for the next few minutes, and then we're going to go head over to the facility for all the fun stuff and settle in and all that. James brings up a good point. The pick the Falcons make might cue run on tackles potentially. Yeah. I think some of them I've seen corner. I don't know what the Falcons are necessarily. What they do in your locked on draft? What did they do? Do you remember?
One moment.
I'm trying to remember what they did in the Fan Nation one too.
I'm fairly certain that they went edge rusher and they went Dallas Turner. The edge rusher that's commonly attached to them though is Laiatu Latu right now.
Yeah. I mean, that it could well. I just don't know if I'm buying the hype that all these offensive tackles are going to just start magically going. Now, I think there is going to be a run on them, but the quarterbacks are still going to go, and I think that bodes well for the Saints. But
I also think that people are taking a little bit of a leap in logic too, to where they're saying like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of trade ups, because all that you're really saying, like if you go and look at like, Daniel Jeremiah and, Albert Breer and all the others that are talking about trading up, trade ups for offensive tackles, they're just saying that in the first round, you're going to see a lot of trade ups for offensive tackles. This doesn't necessarily mean early in the first round. That could be the guys at the end of the first round that people are trying to get up and go and grab before, to get a 5th-year option on them and all those other things. It could go either way. Now I know I believe Breer also talked about the Saints as a potential trade up candidate, but I mean, they're a potential trade-up candidate every year. This is what they do. They find a guy that they like, they trade up, they go and get him. But I don't know that we know for sure that all those trade-ups are going to happen between, 8 and 13. Those trade-ups could happen at the end of the the bottom of the 20s into the 30s, to make sure that, kind of like what we usually see with defensive tackles or defensive ends, rather. Sorry. Edge rushers tend to have a run at the end of the first round because you want that cost control and everything like that. So maybe that's really where we end up seeing all those trade ups.
Yep. We got another one. Layden Robinson from Tamu. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, violent. like in the best way possible. Like really violent dude. And that's one of the
kind of like that
really...
Trevor Penning violence.
Yeah, he got a little, he's got a little bit of that. He might stop a little bit earlier on the whistle though. Layden does, and I know that was one of the
won't get any training camp fights with Malcolm Rhodes.
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
I think that was the big thing that a lot of people were kind of concerned about when it came, or not concerned about, but that was always the narrative around Trevor Penning and everything like that. Yeah. So I like that part of his game. Size wise, I think
it's like 6'3".
Yeah,
is what he is at. Looking at
3 is what he hits. I'm trying to remember what his weight is. See if I can.
No, he's like a 4th or 5th round projection.
Yeah,
he's at where you're looking at him.
Yeah, he's at 302, which is pretty solid. Like you can deal with that. I mean, it'd be nice to see him put on just a little bit of weight, get in the 310 area and all the other stuff. He did miss his last, if I remember correctly, he missed games with injury at the end of the season last year. So I think medicals might be a part of his evaluation at this point and everything like that. But that's not out of the ordinary.
For sure.
So, but I love his demeanor, and I love the way he plays. He's a violent dude.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Ross. So let's make our predictions. So, and you said you're doing your mock, but let's just realistically say, when the night is over, the Saints will have drafted who?
I'm going to Talisa Fuaga, Oregon State tackle.
I'm going to Talisa Fuaga as well. I think that's the pick. I just feel like that is. I mean, just it all the evidence. I think that would be the guy. I think that Alt's your first tackle off the board. I don't think the Saints should trade up for Alt. I just don't. I would hate it if they would. I think Fashanu is going to go before as well. And so I think that's probably the logical pick there. I don't think there's much else unless somebody throws in an absolute major curveball, but the Saints should just do that and be happy. Yeah. Oh, of course. Of course.
But I think like 4 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers. Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas, is probably going top 10. You're probably going to see another edge rusher go top 10 at 9 or 8 or at 8 or 9. You might see, and then Joe Alt is one of those guys in the top 10 too. So then you've got 11, 12, 13 in front of you with Fuaga, Faltano, Fashanu, and Latham all as options and everything. So one of those guys should be there. One of those 4 should be there. So I'm not, I think it's going to be, I don't think that the Saints have to move. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I don't think the Saints have to move to get a guy.
Yeah, so we're not thinking they'll trade up. We're thinking that they're going to stay put and do Fuaga. I think that's probably where we're looking at. I think if we're in agreement, I think
I'm
that's
not
just
ruling out a
play.
trade up though.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out a trade up, but I think that's the thing, and that's the worst part is if there are and they can't, they get, and I referenced it earlier, they get antsy and then they start trading stuff, and then that just doesn't make sense. Like I think stick to your guns in this. I think you're going to be able to do it. Will asked if we ever been in the draft war room. No, we're not allowed to be, but the Saints do host us at their facility. They take care of us, so shout out to them. They work hard to make sure we're happy, and so I know that's a tall task. Blake Fisher. Any thoughts on him?
Blake Fisher. He's the other Notre Dame tackle, right? Yes, he's the other Notre Dame tackle. 6'5", 310. Pretty good. I think the only thing that I have with him is just like how much did he benefit from the guy on the opposite side of the line? You know what I mean? So you're always kind of wanting to figure those out. But boy, he's athletic, fits in the zone run, super like finesse guy and everything like that. So I do like that. I wonder about his play strength sometimes. I think is going to be a little bit of what it is. Dane Brugler compared him to Nicholas Petit-Frere, the old Ohio State tackle that went to Tennessee and everything. So he could be a guy as a candidate to move inside too, with that being the case.
Yeah, for sure. Never know. I mean, there's so many different ones. And again, I on my mock, it was I went with not with necessarily because they were small school, but I'll just run it down. You can give your 2 cents and then you can tell me about yours. But so I went Fuaga in the first round, Keon Coleman in the second round because Xavier Legette wasn't there. I think the speed is probably one of the biggest question marks on Coleman. And then I went Mustafa in the 5th round for safety from Wake Forest, Bo Limmer at the 168, Quantez Stiggers at CFL at 170.
Love him.
Stop.
Great pick.
Javon
Great
Foster,
pick. Great pick.
Javon at Mizzou. I was thinking about the other thing we talked about the other day. Then Isaac Garindo at 190, and awesome. Levi Drake Rodriguez at Texas A&M Commerce at 199, and then 239. My guy John Tree Hunter at Georgia State. Now, what I like about him, because you were asking some of the things like Zach Bond vibes. He's a guy that kind of like a hybrid. It's not like. I best thinking about like a Sua Cravens back in the day. You remember Sua Cravens? How he's kind of like that hybrid linebacker safety type thing. And so I think John Trey is best suited as a linebacker, but I think that he has some versatility. He's really strong in coverage. So it gets like running backs, tight ends. So I like his coverage in that. And so I think at a 7th round pick, I would love it. I just don't know if he's going to be there, but for sure.
Yeah. I would love Washington. Oh yeah. That's all about all.
We'd be happy. We'd probably be happy. I think the one that most people won't be happy with, I get the sense is JC Latham. I think that's just everybody that is out there, even some of the guys that do this as well. And I think Latham, but I would be happy with Latham. I think there's concerns there, but I think they would have done those checks and stuff. Why not Brendan Rice? Why not?
Well, you already had Keon Coleman.
Yeah, that's right.
You already had Keon Coleman. But yes, why not Brendan Rice? If you can't get a Keon Coleman, go and get Brendan Rice. Yeah, I'll run through my my mock real quick. This one was my final. Stood pat at 14. Final mock draft. That fits. That's really dope. So at 14, Talisa Fuaga in the first round. Then I did the unthinkable and I traded down. Look, I think there's value to trade down in the second round. All right. I think there's value to do it.
Down. No.
I'm just saying.
I think so too. No, I would agree. What did you trade? What is that thing?
So I traded 45 and then to the Los Angeles Rams, and I got 52 and 99. So it was 450 points for 45, and then 484 points is the combined 52 and 99. I think you're okay with that because the Rams are the one paying more to move up, and there was still a quarterback on the board with Michael Penix Jr. in that scenario.
Yeah, drop 7 and pick up 90. I think that's easy. Great. Yeah.
Easy.
I think even if you're looking at depending on the other needs that they have, depending on how it goes. So yeah.
And at the time, like I'm looking at interior offensive line, which really my only opportunity there was Frazier out of West Virginia. It's really the only one that would have made sense at 45. I could have reached for Cooper BB if I wanted to. Would have been okay. Would have been perfectly okay with that. But didn't want to. Right. Then I had Troy Franklin, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Malachi Corley, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, like all those guys.
You drafted them all? No, I'm just kidding.
No. But like they're all on the board. And so if I move down 7 spots, one of them's making it. You know what I mean? And so I just moved down the 7 spots, picked up the extra 4th or 3rd, excuse me, in that case, like at the very, very bottom of the 3rd. And then I was able to get Xavier Legette. at that point. But replace Xavier Legette with whichever one of those other wide receivers, and you're still happy with that, right?
Yeah.
So I went Xavier Legette at 52. Then I went Cooper Beebe at 99. And so I was still able to get him later on and everything. And then if he wasn't there, I could have gone Christian Mahogany out of Boston College, who they've had in for a visit. So they have a good idea of his medicals, things like that. Like I could have addressed interior offensive line one way or another at that point.
Okay.
So Cooper Beebe at 99. Then I traded 168, 175 to get up to 121 with the Denver Broncos, oh buddy, oh pal. And then I grabbed Cole Bishop, got my new starting free safety candidate there, or starting strong safety candidate, excuse me.
Yep.
150, I went with Will Shipley, the running back out of Clemson. I wanted the pass catcher there. Over 40 passes caught last year, so really nice. Javon Foster at 170, because I do believe in doubling down at tackle for sure.
Yes.
190, I did this one for you, and I did this one for Mike Triplett. It's Torrey Taylor. Torrey Taylor, the punter out of Iowa. At this point,
man.
At this point, like I've addressed all my needs. Like I got 3 offensive linemen, I got a wide receiver, I got a safety. I added to my playmaking ability with my running back. Yeah, I'll go and grab him. 44.2 net punt yards, which is better than Lou Hedley, and 48.2 total gross average, which was better than Lou Hedley's 38. So I'll bring in a little bit of competition there. Then at 199, I went with Tip Ryman. I think that's a good spot for him. I'm not going to rush for him, but if he's there late, I don't mind grabbing him. And then I went with Marcus Harris, the interior defensive lineman from Auburn, to wrap up the draft role at round 7, pick 293. Got to add a little bit of weight, but really good run stopping potential, and then really nice penetrating ability. Can be disruptive in the pass game.
For sure. Cool. I mean, I think either way, both of our mocks, I think all of our mocks, I think people would be happy. But again, the Saints, just don't know. And look, here's the other part. I'd say some of the other FCS schools or HBCU, all that stuff, they have some good players in there. So like when I took Garindo, I gave some love to Jarvion Howard. He's one of those guys that I just absolutely love. I really think he's somebody special. Or a Sundiata Anderson from Grambling as a pass rusher. I think that's another one that could work out in day 3. So I think those are hopefully we see more HBCU draftees this year, and I think they got some good ones. Zarion Hayes, remember him? He was balled out at the HBCU game from Alabama A&M, I believe. And so, this is the big thing. Just don't panic. That's all I asked for tonight. Just don't panic. Don't panic. And
let the draft come to you.
But
let the draft come to you.
But we'll see. I'm really excited about it. And so we'll know soon enough, because the draft is in we're about to conclude in a little bit less than 3 hours, and they'll get underway. And then Saints will pick probably around 7:30ish, maybe a little bit different. 7:30, 7:45, probably. It's 10 minutes a pick.
Yeah.
So
I forgot that they're like in the first half.
Yeah. So I think that's probably about fair, accurate.
Yeah,
so.
we gotta sit there and wait for the Bears to take all 10 minutes of their clock, even though they don't know what they're doing already.
Well, reason why they do a lot of that too is because of the commercial crap. I mean, that's really like the teams will have the pick and they're like,
TV time.
Wait, TV timeout. Yes, tonight is at 7. Tomorrow's at 6 Central Time. That is for those who aren't in New Orleans or in that Central Time frame. And so, 6 tonight, 7 o'clock on Friday, and then 11 o'clock on Saturday.
11,
yeah. So it'll be a fun 3 days. We will be over at the facility on Metairie and such. Any parting shots, thoughts, remarks before we get out of here, Ross?
Parting shots, J. Cole just should have never even entered the Coliseum with Kendrick. That's my parting shot. No, man, I'm excited for this year's draft. And I think the one thing that I will say is that if you see the New Orleans Saints draft a cornerback early, that's a real don't panic moment. Like the Saints have got to be ready for post Marshawn Lattimore days, whether they're here sooner. I doubt that they're here soon, but you got to be ready no matter what in the next 4 years. And then Paul Adebo's in a contract year. And so even if you see the Saints go cornerback early, like it's not specifically indicative of anything happening with the impending departure of Marshawn Lattimore, but you got to build your team and you got to be ready.
Some point. And that's why I like Quantez from the CFL. He has that experience. And so that's one of the reasons why I really liked him too. But we're going to find out soon enough, Ross Jackson. So yes,
tomorrow.
Well,
I'm
guys,
so ready.
As always, we really appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We are getting so close to that 500 mark. I know you guys can do it. Who Dat Nation has been fantastic. If you haven't checked out all the written stuff, go to Saints News Network. I've got all the draft information that you want. We got the mocks. We've got draft profiles from Bob Rose. We've got all of Ross Jackson's mocks and coverage, and Kyle T. Mosley's stuff too. So be sure to check out si.com/NFL/Saints. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And guys, if you know anybody locally that would like to, we're looking for sponsors. So I'm just going to throw that little thing out at you. And come talk to us. We'd love to talk and partner up, because we got some big plans for this season. So, and it's only getting started. So
not the least of which being the fact that like we're going to California to cover training camp, which not a lot of people are going to be able to have eyes on. So
yeah, I think it's going to be less than 10 of us probably. Yeah, I'd be surprised if it topples over 10. I don't know. I just don't think so. Thank you, Jerry, for the support. Appreciate you. Will, thank you so much. Guys, that's going to do it for us today. On behalf of Ross Jackson, I'm John Hendricks signing out for Second and Saints. Y'all have a good one, and let's hope we're not disappointed tonight.